For 5 years, she was Pretty Miss Norma Jean, the beloved sweetheart of country music, singing alongside Porter Wagoner on one of television's most popular shows. She was the picture of wholesome country grace, the girl next door with a voice like an angel. Her duets were legendary, her smile was constant, and her presence was a comforting weekly ritual in households all across America. To the world, the partnership between Porter and Norma Jean was perfect harmony. But that smile was a mask, and the harmony hid a devastating secret. The story viewers saw on their TV screens was only half the story. Behind the curtain, a different reality was taking shape, one filled with quiet control and a heartache that grew louder with each passing year. Then, in 1965, at the absolute peak of her fame, Norma Jean did the unthinkable. She walked away. For decades, the real reasons remained shrouded in rumor. Her departure created a void that would soon be filled by another rising star, Dolly Parton, and Norma Jean's chapter seemed to close as quickly as it had begun. Fans were left wondering, why would anyone just walk away from that kind of success? What could have possibly been so bad that she'd choose silence over the spotlight? Now, after a lifetime of dignified quiet, the full story is finally clear. At 87 years old, Norma Jean is looking back, not with bitterness, but with the wisdom that only time can provide. This is the truth about the tortured relationship that forced her to choose between stardom and survival. To understand why she left, you first have to understand just how high she had climbed. The Nashville that Norma Jean entered in the early 1960s was the heart of country music, and into this world stepped Norma Jean Beasler, a young woman from Wellston, Oklahoma, with a story as real as the music she sang. Born in 1938 to a farm family during the Great Depression, her roots were planted in hard soil. Like a lot of kids back then, she grew up listening to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio, dreaming of one day standing on that famous stage. Her biggest inspiration was Kitty Wells, a trailblazer who proved a woman's voice could be powerful, poignant, and a huge success. Norma Jean's own talent bloomed early. At just 12 years old, she landed her own radio show on KLPR in Oklahoma City. Imagine that. A young girl, barely a teenager, finding her voice live on the air. She later admitted she struggled with a stutter as a child, and the thought of speaking on the radio terrified her far more than singing. So she practiced relentlessly into a small tape recorder, working on her words just as much as her songs. It was the first of many battles she would fight with quiet determination. Instead of going to football games, she spent her high school years touring with Western swing bands and honing her craft in dusty dance halls. She even befriended another aspiring teenage singer who would also make history, Wanda Jackson. They were two young women with big dreams in a world run by men. Her first taste of national exposure came in 1955 with a regular spot on the ABC TV show Ozark Jubilee. The show's star, Red Foley, thought Norma Jean Beasler was a bit of a mouthful for TV and suggested they shorten it. From then on, she was known to the world simply as Norma Jean. After a few years on the Jubilee, she made the big move to Nashville in 1960. It was there she reconnected with a charismatic performer she'd met on the road, Porter Wagoner. With his flashy rhinestone suits and folksy charm, Porter was building an empire. His syndicated TV show was taking off, and he needed a new girl singer. He invited Norma Jean to join. In 1960, she officially became part of The Porter Wagoner Show, and a new era began. Porter christened her Pretty Miss Norma Jean, a nickname that would define her. With her perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that lit up the era's black and white TVs, she was the embodiment of country elegance. The show's popularity was staggering, reaching over 100 markets and making Norma Jean one of the most visible women in country music. Her role was clear. She was the steady, beautiful presence beside the flamboyant Porter. Their on-screen chemistry was electric. He was the confident showman. She was the sweet songbird. Viewers adored them. Her own recording career with RCA Victor, guided by the legendary Chet Atkins, took off. Her first big single, Let's Go All the Way, climbed the charts in 1964. More hits followed, like I'm a Walking Advertisement for the Blues. She was realizing her lifelong dream as a regular beloved performer on the Grand Ole Opry stage. By any measure, she was a star, living what looked like a fairy tale. But behind the smiles, a much more complicated story was unfolding. The relationship between Norma Jean and Porter Wagoner was the engine of the show's success, but it was also the source of deep and growing turmoil in her life. From the beginning, their connection was charged with an energy that was more than just professional. Rumors of a romance started swirling almost immediately. While neither confirmed an affair, the whispers followed them all over Nashville. In later years, Norma Jean would carefully describe it as an emotional entanglement, a phrase that says everything about the blurred lines between their lives. The biggest complication? Porter Wagoner was married. This fact cast a long shadow over their entire association, creating a situation that was inherently unstable. This dynamic also created a huge power imbalance. Porter wasn't just her singing partner, he was her boss, her mentor, and the gatekeeper to her career. He was the star whose name was on the show. She was, in the language of the time, the girl singer, a role that always came second. And Porter, a man known for his rigid control over his brand, extended that control to Norma Jean. She later revealed the profound sense of being silenced she felt during those years. The directive was clear: smile, sing, and stand beside him. Her job was to be an accessory to his stardom. She felt her own artistic identity starting to fade as she became the character of Pretty Miss Norma Jean, a creation owned and operated by Porter Wagoner. You can hear the evidence of this conflict in her music. On TV, she was all sunshine, but her records told a story of heartache and betrayal. In 1965, she had a hit with the Harlan Howard song, I Wouldn't Buy a Used Car from Him. The lyrics were a sharp indictment of a smooth-talking, untrustworthy man, and you can bet people read between the lines. Another song, You Changed Everything About Me But My Name, felt even more pointed. These weren't just clever country tunes. They felt like diary entries set to music. The emotional turmoil is said to have peaked in a story that sounds like one of her own ballads. Nashville legend has it that the psychodrama between them became a vortex of promises and pain. Porter allegedly bought a ring for Norma Jean, a symbol of a future that depended on him getting a divorce. But the divorce never came. Heartbroken, Norma Jean supposedly threw the ring back at him. In a final surreal twist to the rumor, Porter reportedly gave that same ring to his friend, country star Mel Tillis, to use for his own wedding. True or not, the story captures the emotional weight of her situation. She was living in limbo, her personal happiness tied to a man she couldn't have, and her professional success tied to a man she was starting to resent. The golden cage had become a prison, and she was looking for a way out. By 1965, the pressure was just too much. 5 years of smiling through the pain, of navigating the emotional minefield with Porter, had taken its toll. The decision to leave wasn't a sudden impulse. It was the slow, painful conclusion to a long chapter. Publicly, a simple reason was given for her departure. Norma Jean announced she was leaving the show to get married to a man from back home in Oklahoma. It was a clean, respectable exit that no one could question in that era. For decades, this remained the accepted truth because it was neat and tidy, and it hid the much messier reality. The real reasons, which she'd only talk about many years later, came from a desperate need to get her own soul back. The constant control and emotional exhaustion had become a creative death sentence. She described the feeling of being young and not knowing how to stand up to a figure as dominant as Porter Wagoner. Leaving wasn't an act of defiance. As she later put it was an escape. During her final year on the show, Porter had temporarily hired another talented singer, Jeannie Seeley, to fill in for her at times. For Norma Jean, this may have been the final proof that she was, in the end, replaceable, that the show, and the man at its center, would move on with or without her. The dream she had worked so hard for now felt like a gilded cage, and she finally realized the only person who could set her free was herself. And so, she made an impossible choice. She walked away from one of the most popular shows in the nation. She left behind the hit records, the sold-out concerts, and the adoration of millions. She chose to leave pretty Miss Norma Jean behind to try and find Norma Jean Beasler again. She chose uncertainty over security. She chose survival over stardom. She later reflected on that time with heartbreaking simplicity. When asked why she finally left, she said, "I had to go because I no longer love myself there." In that one sentence, you find the entire truth. It wasn't about money or ambition. It was about looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back. And so, with a quiet resolve, she packed her bags and headed home to Oklahoma, leaving a stunned music industry to ask the question that would follow her for the next 50 years. Why? Norma Jean's story is one of incredible strength, but also one that many fans have personal memories of. Before we explore what happened after she left the spotlight, share your favorite memory of pretty Miss Norma Jean in the comments below. We love reading how these stars touched your lives. After Norma Jean left, the Nashville machine did what it does best. It kept right on moving. The show had to go on. After Jeannie Seeley filled the spot for about a year, Porter Wagoner, ever the showman, found his next star. In 1967, a young, ambitious songwriter from East Tennessee stepped into the spotlight beside him. Her name was Dolly Parton. Dolly's arrival marked a new chapter in country music history. But for Norma Jean's fans, the transition was rough. Dolly herself admitted that replacing pretty Miss Norma Jean was tough, as audiences would often chant Norma Jean's name during her first performances. But as Dolly's star began to rise, the memory of her predecessor began to fade. Norma Jean went from being an indispensable part of a national phenomenon to being the answer to a trivia question. Who was the girl singer on the Porter Wagoner show before Dolly? The professional consequences were severe. While she'd left the show, she hadn't planned to leave music. She was still under contract with RCA and was a beloved performer at the Grand Ole Opry. But in 1960s Nashville, loyalty was everything. She later said she felt that the Opry community grew distant after she left Porter's world. The sense of belonging was gone, and making the required trips from Oklahoma to Nashville no longer felt worth it. She continued to record for RCA until 1973, producing albums and singles that hinted at her new reality. Titles like Jackson Ain't, A Very Big Town, and Heaven Help the Working Girl had a gritty feminist edge. The music was strong, but without the TV show to promote it, her singles struggled to gain traction. The industry that had once celebrated her seemed to have moved on. She settled into a new life in Oklahoma, got married, and helped raise her husband's 3 children. But the transition wasn't smooth. Her marriage eventually ended, and for decades, she remained silent about the real reasons she left Nashville. The culture of the time just didn't encourage women to speak out against powerful men. In the years that followed, Norma Jean battled personal demons, including a struggle with alcohol. It's not hard to connect this fight with the years of emotional turmoil she endured. The pain she had suppressed for so long had to go somewhere. Ultimately, it was her faith that led her to healing. Norma Jean became a born-again Christian, a change she says saved her life. It gave her the strength to face her past and build a new future. She eventually found a new community and purpose in Branson, Missouri, where she even started a cowboy church. She never stopped singing, but now she did it on her own terms. The price of her freedom had been mainstream stardom, but it was a price she was willing to pay to get her own voice back. For nearly half a century, Norma Jean's story was one told by others, a narrative defined by who she was before Dolly. But over the years, through quiet reflection and candid interviews, Norma Jean has slowly pieced the real story together for us. There wasn't one big tell-all moment, but rather a gradual revealing of the truth. Now, with the clarity of hindsight, she speaks about those years with a calm dignity. She's confirmed what was long rumored, the existence of a deep, emotional attachment between her and Porter, a relationship that was the source of both great affection and great pain. She doesn't place blame, but she doesn't hide from the truth either. She's spoken about the possessiveness, the pressure, and the feeling that her worth was tied to being Porter's girl. Her words give new weight to the old stories. When we hear her speak now about needing her own voice, we can finally connect it to the years of being told to just smile and sing. She's described how, as a young woman, she simply didn't know she was allowed to leave, that she had the power to say no. In one poignant interview, she admitted, "I didn't realize how much I'd given up, not until I was gone." She doesn't paint herself as a victim. Instead, she's a woman who made a choice. By finally telling her side of the story, she is doing what she couldn't do in 1965. She is taking control of her own narrative. The mystery of why Pretty Miss Norma Jean walked away is no longer a mystery. The answer, in her own words, is simple. She left to find freedom. Freedom from a man, yes, but also freedom from an industry that asked women to be beautiful and talented, but above all, to be quiet. After decades of silence, Norma Jean's truth is more powerful than any hit record. For too long, the story of Norma Jean was treated as a prelude. She was the one before Dolly, a footnote in the much larger story of Porter Wagoner. But seeing her that way means you miss the point entirely. Norma Jean wasn't a footnote. She was a pioneer. In an era when girl singers were often treated like interchangeable ornaments, she was a genuine star. She recorded nearly a dozen albums for a major label and landed around 10 top 40 country singles. She even earned a Grammy nomination for her brilliant 1966 hit, The Game of Triangles, a stark drama about infidelity that was incredibly audacious for its time. It proved she was far more than just a pretty face singing sweet songs, but her most enduring legacy might be the very act that seemed to end her career. Her decision to walk away from The Porter Wagoner Show wasn't an act of failure. It was a radical act of self-preservation. In a time when the industry demanded female compliance, she chose her own well-being over fame. She refused to be a casualty of someone else's story. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the architect of her own rescue. Today, her story is finally being reframed. She's no longer seen as the woman who was replaced, but as a courageous individual who reclaimed her voice. She was, as one writer put it, an outlaw before they even gave it a name, unwilling to compromise her soul for the spotlight. Norma Jean's choice in 1965 changed the course of her life, and in doing so, changed the course of country music history. She paid a high price for her freedom, but she gained something far more valuable in return: herself. Her journey is a powerful story of survival, faith, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Do you think she made the right decision? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of country music's greatest legends.